All right, we've got another big game for us in the Bay Area, and a winnable game. I think all these games are winnable, and we've noticed watching the film and having practice, it's just little things we need to work on. So we're hopefully getting those things ironed out, and we'll be ready for Thursday. With that, I'll just open it up for questions.
You talk about how these games are winnable. You guys have been through the toughest part of your schedule. Now, looking forward to the road ahead, how does that kind of take a little bit of a weight off your guys or change their mentality?
You know, it doesn't take any weight off, because with our record, you got to win now. You have to put together some wins and turn this thing around. So while there is not any weight off, but our guys are handling this about as well as they can. I like the way they're handling the film sessions. I like the way they're handling practice. There's no real give up in these guys, no real sort of negative vibe yet, and that's good to see. But having said that, we've got to put together a full game and keep the mistakes to a very, very bare minimum.
Is there ever a concern, Craig, where you're close, you're almost close to getting over the hump, that maybe it just won't happen?
I guess there's a possibility, but we don't have that mindset. At least I don't have that mindset, and it doesn't feel like the guys do. We've won enough games where we feel like we know how to win games and are capable of it. It's just having the stomach to put it all together. And stomach, I mean, that could be guts. That could be courage. That could be character. That's just a lot of things that go into winning a game at this point.
Going into the season, the goal was, NCAA tournament. How does the expectations change, after a rough start like this? And what's the goal now for the rest of the season?
This goal is still the same, but the shorter term goal is to win the next game you play. I mean, our goal is still the same. You can still because we play a conference tournament, we still have an opportunity to do that. But we're really focused on the short-term goal of winning today's practice, then winning tomorrow's practice, and then winning the game.
You're talking about the close. You've lost a close one, and you're there every game. Do you think if you can just get one of those games, it could turn the whole thing around?
It absolutely. From our standpoint, we feel like we're plays away from winning games. Not, we haven't had any. I mean, all season long. I mean, I look back at what's the biggest margin of difference is either Oregon or Arizona, and those teams are both ranked in the top 10 now. So, it could be a lot worse. I think we could not be playing well, or we could not have been playing against such good competition, or we might be at full strength and just not know what to do next. But we know what we need to do. We just have to execute.
You talked at the beginning of the season, you said you wanted 4 extra stops a game that could give you a real chance. How do you think defensively you're looking, and are you accomplishing that?
Yeah, well, it's that now they have to be the 4 right stops. They have to be at the right time. I thought before we got going here in the conference, we were getting those 4 stops a game. But now conference play is different. It's harder. It's more intense. And, along with the 4 stops, we have to continue to be productive on offense. And I think on offense, we haven't really hit on all cylinders yet.
You mentioned the guys are taking it pretty well. How about you and the staff? Are you having to do anything different, new?
We're trying a lot of different things. I did a little bit of a different film session where I concentrated on some different things. But practice has been, we tailor practice for the teams that we're playing. So that's pretty much stayed the same. The intensity level's been a little bit higher because I think guys feel that sense of urgency. But as a staff, we're committed to doing what we're doing. We haven't made any real drastic changes, and we're trying to give these guys that level of confidence that they had before they started on this streak.
What are you expecting out of Cal?
Well, they're always a tough team to play at their place. They've got 2 really prolific scorers in Crabbe and Cobb. I don't. they're not the teams that they have been in the past, but they're still capable of putting together a good string of games, especially at home. So, but what we have to do is we have to limit the two guys who are averaging 20 and 15. If we limit those two guys and then keep the other guys right where they are, we've got a good chance of winning the game. But playing on the road's tough, but everybody's got to do it.
Which one do you anticipate putting Jarmal on?
We hadn't decided yet. And might not be either one of them.
How about Stanford? They looked pretty good the other night.
Yeah, they looked really good against Utah, and I didn't see the whole game. I was flipping through while I was working on the Cal Scout, and they were making shots, which they hadn't done in a while. So, but I haven't really taken a whole lot of time to look at them since we have such a good amount of time in between. We'll start working on them after the Cal game.
Do you like that extra day in between a game like that?
That's question's been posed to me before. I don't mind it. I actually like it better when people can't prepare as much for us. We have sort of a different scout compared to the rest of the league, so the extra day is what it is. I mean, we have it because of the television. I like the fact that all of our games are on national television, so from that standpoint, I like having the extra day.
Do you expect a guy like Langston to take another step this weekend?
I'll give you. You've heard me say this before. No one ever plays well when they go home, but his progress up to this point has been terrific. So it'll be interesting to see how the pressures of going home right when he's playing well are going to take its toll on him. But he is a hard worker. He listens to what we say. He has gotten better every single day in practice, and we need him to play well. So I'm hoping that he can pull a Devon Collier and play well at home.
Langston was one of those guys after the game, after Washington, when you guys singled out in the post game as someone on the scout team really elevated the play and got them ready. Have you seen a different kind of emotion and intensity from him going into this week at Cal?
No, he's been as steady as he's been. He gives you all of his effort all the time, as do most of our players. So there's no real difference because he's going to play at home or anything like that. I think that the level of intensity of practice has everything to do with our conference record.
You mentioned tailoring your practices specifically for each team. What are you doing specifically for Cal?
Well, I don't want to tell you that in the news because then they'll hear it. So, but what we're trying to do is we're trying to beat them. So, I'm not trying to be flip, but we want to keep that a secret until it's time.
Do they look much different to you without Jorge?
Yeah. Oh, yes. Yeah. That's first team All Pac-10 player of the year type guy. Not that Crab or Cobb couldn't be one of those guys, but that kid had our number. I mean, he just played well every time they played against him. Even the games we won, he did a number on us. So they do look a little bit different there. It's interesting. I would not have known with Angus and Daniel Gomez going down. I never would have understood how much leadership plays such a huge role on your team, and I can see that in their team as well. So I'm sure they miss him tremendously.
Yeah, I was talking to Todd McKim, one of their broadcasters, about that fact, Coach, about the loss of Gutierrez. It's hard to quantify in the toughness realm, the leadership realm. And if you felt similar things with a guy like Angus, things that you wouldn't have necessarily even expected?
This is the first time, Mike, that I've dealt with a void in leadership. I mean, I've dealt with injuries and even suspensions before, but not to the guy who is your both formal and informal leader on the team. And man, it really makes a difference. And don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to make any excuses or anything, but in the context of your comparison to Gutierrez, I can just imagine what they're going through trying to figure out who's the guy to step up and replace him from a leadership standpoint. It's one of those things that in the corporate world, you sort of have time to groom your next leader, and guys aren't leaving or as quickly. But in the sporting world, it's harder to groom that next person. You really have to recruit that next person.
Is that something that you take away from this, that like in the future, maybe looking for that quality?
I
in a
sure
guy?
do, Phil. I mean, you try and look for leadership qualities, at least I do, in players, but it's not one of the things that's at the top of the list. I mean, especially when you're in a conference like this, you're really looking for talent first, and then the ability to compete in the Pac-12, and down the line you start thinking, okay, this guy might be a good leader, because you can't good leadership doesn't make up for mediocre talent. That's the one thing I do know.
Earlier in the year, you said you either play to the way you recruit or recruit to the way you play. Where do you feel you on that spectrum?
Well, we are in sort of transition, going from being a team with little talent to getting more and more talent. So we've pretty much been recruiting. We've been playing with the recruits that we have, but we've been sort of recruiting to the way we want to play, which is kind of the way we're playing now. So we're always going to look for the type of players that we have now: athletic, high basketball IQ, able to compete against these future pros that are in our conference. That's what we're looking for. And as long as we can continue to recruit those folks, we'll play the way we're playing. If at some point we find that we can't, which it doesn't look like is the case here, at least in the near future, I'm really happy with this upcoming recruiting class and who we're in with now. But if we weren't able to do that, then we'd have to think about changing the way we played.
In terms of, the next step after recruiting is obviously development. For you personally, what do you feel you're developing as a coach, and what do you want to develop?
Yeah, this is clearly this year might be second challenging only to the first year here, when you really kind of dig in and you're underneath the building rather than at ground level. This is probably the second most challenging time, where you've got a lot of moving parts. You're developing a new way to play. You're both offensively and defensively. You're not at full strength with your personnel. You've had some adversity off the court. It's all these things are learning experiences for me, and it's been terrific, because it just adds to your resume of stuff that you know how to deal with, and because all of this will come along again, especially the adversity with regard to injuries. We've been really lucky here in my 5 years we've had injuries, but they've not been to top guys, and now that we're dealing with that, it just shows you how you have to really, all 13 scholarships have to be the guys who you can put in the game. Have to be.
You mentioned one thing you'd like to do better is defend man-to-man. You like to teach man-to-man defense.
Right.
How do you see that progressing through the season, even into next season?
It may sound like a weird thing to say, but we're getting to be a better man-to-man team. I mean, we're a year and a half or a little bit more into doing this, and I've learned a lot. I've talked to a lot of people. I've watched a lot of teams who are good at it, and we try and articulate that to our players. But what it comes down to is that you have to believe in being a good defensive team, just like you have to believe in being a winning team. And our guys are getting it. I've noticed, when I first got here, when Roberto Nelson, I'll use him as an example. When he first got here, he just didn't like to defend, and now he knows that we need him to defend. He's gotten better at the techniques of it, and in the last few games, he's been a better defender. I can go back as far as the UCLA game. I thought he did a great job on Jordan Adams. I thought he did a pretty darn good job on the guards at USC. So he's a really good example. And then, even Devon Collier, who's not the greatest defender, he's gotten better at on-the-ball defending. And, we just have to keep working at it.
when you look at a team like Cal in terms of defending, is it almost better when you know that the majority of points are coming from just a couple of guys?
It does, but you know the other three guys in the starting lineup are all capable. You know the freshman kid, what's Wallace? Yeah, the freshman kid Wallace scored 2,000 something points in high school, so he's capable of scoring. I think Kravish, he's only averaging 8 points a game, but he had a good game against us last year from a scoring standpoint. And I also know that Solomon. Richard Solomon is also a guy who's capable of putting in a lot of points. So you don't want to get so focused on those two that you know the other guys end up scoring more than their average. So you want to be completely aware of the two guys who can hurt you the most, but you want to maintain some good focus on the other guys.
Coach, coming out of the Washington State game, there was a rebounding disparity. They got you by 12 in that. When you look at the tape and the teaching points for the guys going forward, what were those?
Yeah, well, what I saw in the tape were a lot of, I'll let the other guy get the rebound. And when you have a guy who's a double-double waiting to happen, like Eric Moreland, you tend to have some guys who say, okay, I'll let him get it. That's number one. Number two, the foul trouble that Devon Collier was in, that was key because he's another good rebounder for us. So having him out the majority of the first half was also, that was a critical blow to our rebounding. But the real culprit was sort of, all right, let's let Eric get it, and then we'll all do something else. And you know, this is a terrific team because when you point these kind of things out to them in the film session, it rarely happens again. I mean, you know, this might. I'd have to look at the stats, but there might be 2 or 3 games this season where we've been out rebounded. There's certainly not been many that we've been out rebounded by this much.